The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside the general store in Dodge City, Kansas, throwing Daniela Henriksen against the wooden seat hard enough to bruise her shoulder through her traveling dress. And she knew before she even stepped down into the dusty street that this place would test every ounce of courage she possessed. The year was 1878, and the frontier town sprawled before her like something from a fever dream. All weathered wood and sun-bleached paint, so different from the green valleys of Norway she had left behind 6 months ago. Her parents had died within weeks of each other during the brutal winter, leaving her alone at 22 with nothing but memories, and a letter from her Uncle Magnus, who had emigrated to Kansas 3 years prior. He had promised her work at his boarding house, a fresh start in America, a place where she could begin again. Daniela climbed down from the stagecoach, her legs unsteady after 3 days of travel, her dark blonde hair escaping from its pins despite her best efforts. The driver tossed her trunk down with little ceremony, the leather-bound case hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. She paid him with the last of her traveling money and turned to face the main street. The August heat struck her immediately, so thick she could almost taste the dust in it. Men in wide-brimmed hats paused their conversations to stare at her. Women in calico dresses whispered behind their hands. She smoothed down her dark blue traveling dress, suddenly conscious of how different her clothing looked compared to the simpler prairie fashions around her. "Excuse me," she said to a woman carrying a basket, her English careful and accented. "I am looking for the Henriksen boarding house. My Uncle Magnus Henriksen owns it." The woman's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You are one of them foreigners," she said, not unkindly but not warmly either. "I do not know about any boarding house run by a foreigner. You might try asking at the saloon, but I would not recommend a decent woman go in there." Daniela felt her cheeks burn but kept her composure. "Thank you," she said quietly. She picked up her trunk, surprised by how heavy it was after the journey had drained her strength, and began walking down the wooden sidewalk. A group of men outside what appeared to be a feed store watched her approach. "Look at that," one of them said loudly enough for her to hear. "Another foreigner coming to take honest work from Americans. Probably does not even speak proper English," another added, and they all laughed. Daniela kept her eyes forward, her grip tightening on the trunk handle. Her uncle had written that Dodge City was rough, but welcoming to those willing to work hard. Perhaps he had been optimistic in his assessment. She passed a mercantile, a land office, and what appeared to be a gunsmith before she had to stop and set down her trunk. Her arms ached, and sweat had begun to soak through her dress despite the relative modesty of her attire. She pulled out the letter from her uncle, checking the address again, though she had memorized it weeks ago. "You lost." A sharp voice made her look up. A woman in a faded yellow dress stood in the doorway of the mercantile, arms crossed over her chest. "We do not need any more foreigners in this town. You should get back on that stage and return to wherever you came from." "I am looking for the Henriksen boarding house," Daniela said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My Uncle Magnus Henriksen died 2 months ago," the woman said flatly. "Fever took him. His boarding house got sold off to pay his debts. There is nothing here for you, girl. Best move along." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Daniela gripped the porch railing to steady herself. Dead. Uncle Magnus was dead, and she had come all this way, spent every penny she had for nothing. She had no family left anywhere in the world now, no home, no prospects. I did not know," she managed to say. The woman's expression softened slightly. "Well, now you do. Like I said, there is nothing for you here." Daniela picked up her trunk again, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. She would not cry in front of these people who had already decided she did not belong. She walked further down the street, no longer sure where she was going, only knowing she needed to move, to do something, to not collapse right there in the dust. "Watch where you are going, you stupid foreigner," a man snapped as she nearly collided with him. He shoved past her roughly, and the trunk slipped from her grip, falling open in the street. Her belongings spilled out. A few dresses, her mother's Bible, her father's pipe, a wooden box containing the last precious items from her old life. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather everything before the passing horses could trample it all. Tears finally escaped, hot and shameful on her cheeks. A horse whinnied nearby, too close, and she looked up to see a massive bay stallion rearing up, its rider fighting to control it. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders and pulled her backward just as the horse's hooves came down where she had been kneeling. She tumbled against someone solid, heard a man's voice say something sharp to the rider, and then she was being helped to her feet. "Are you hurt?" The man asked, and his voice was different from the others she had heard today, deeper and genuinely concerned. Daniela wiped at her eyes and looked up into the face of the man who had saved her. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his dusty hat. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, startling in his tanned face, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I am fine," she said, though her voice shook. "Thank you." He was already crouching down, gathering her scattered belongings with efficient movements. "You should be more careful," he said, but there was no criticism in his tone. "The street is dangerous when the drovers are in town." "I know," she said quietly, kneeling beside him to help. "I am sorry, I am not familiar with this place." His hand stilled when he picked up her mother's Bible, the pages filled with Norwegian text. He glanced at her, then at the book, then back at her face. "You just arrived?" "Yes, today. I came to stay with my uncle, but I just learned he died." The words came out flat, exhausted. "I have nowhere to go now." The man stood, handing her the Bible and several folded dresses. His expression was unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. "Magnus Henriksen was your uncle, you knew him." Everyone knew Magnus. He was a good man. He paused, seeming to consider something. "My name is Benjamin Everett. Most people call me Ben. Daniela Henriksen." She attempted a smile but could not quite manage it. "Most people call me foreign." Something flickered across Ben's face, anger perhaps, quickly controlled. He helped her repack her trunk, his movements careful with her belongings. When everything was secured again, he picked up the trunk as though it weighed nothing. "Come on," he said, starting down the street. "Wait, where are we going?" "Somewhere you can rest and figure out what to do next." He looked back at her, and his expression had softened. "You look like you are about to fall over." Daniela hesitated, but what choice did she have? She followed him down the street, aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. Ben seemed completely unconcerned with the attention, his stride long and purposeful. They passed several more buildings before he turned toward a small restaurant with a hand-painted sign that read, "Abigail's Kitchen." Inside, the air was cooler and smelled wonderfully of fresh bread and roasted meat. A woman in her 50s looked up from wiping down tables, her face breaking into a warm smile when she saw Ben. "Ben Everett, as I live and breathe. Where have you been? I have not seen you in nearly a month." "Been out with the herd, Abby. Just got back this morning." He set down Daniela's trunk and gestured to her. "This is Miss Henriksen. She is Magnus's niece, just arrived from Norway. She needs a place to stay while she sorts things out." Abigail's expression shifted to sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear. You did not know about Magnus, did you?" "No, madam," Daniela said quietly. Well, you cannot stay in my restaurant, but I know Sarah Jenkins has a room above her dress shop that she has been trying to rent out. Let me fetch her." Abigail disappeared through a back door before Daniela could protest. Ben pulled out a chair at one of the tables. "Sit down before you fall down," he said gently. Daniela sank into the chair gratefully. Now that she had stopped moving, the full weight of exhaustion crashed over her. Ben disappeared for a moment and returned with a glass of water, which she accepted with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said. "You did not have to help me." "Yes, I did." His tone left no room for argument. He sat down across from her, removing his hat and setting it on the table. His hair was dark brown, slightly wavy and touched with dust from the trail. "This town can be hard on newcomers, especially those who are different, but that does not make it right. Everyone has made it very clear that I am not welcome here. Not everyone." His eyes held hers steadily. "You are here now, and that makes you as much a part of this place as anyone else. Do not let them tell you different." Before Daniela could respond, Abigail returned with another woman, younger, perhaps in her early 30s, with auburn hair and kind eyes. "This is Sarah Jenkins," Abigail said. "Sarah, this is Daniela Henriksen, Magnus's niece." "I am so sorry about your uncle," Sarah said immediately. "He was a wonderful man. I helped nurse him during his illness, but the fever was too strong." She paused, studying Daniela with a critical but not unkind eye. "Abby says you need a place to stay." "I do not have much money," Daniela admitted, "but I can work. I can clean, cook, sew, anything you need." Sarah's face brightened. "Actually, I could use help in my shop. I make dresses, do alterations, that sort of thing. The work has gotten to be too much for one person. If you are willing to learn and work hard, I can offer you room and board plus a small wage." It was more than Daniela had dared hope for. "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, please, I will work very hard, I promise." "Good. Then it is settled." Sarah smiled. "Let me show you to the room. You look like you could use some rest." Ben stood when they did, retrieving Daniela's trunk once more. Sarah led them out of the restaurant and 2 buildings down to a neat shop with Jenkins' dress shop painted in elegant letters on the window. They went through the shop, filled with bolts of fabric and half-finished garments on forms, and up a narrow staircase to a small room above. It was simple but clean. A narrow bed, a washstand, a small wardrobe, and a single window that looked out over the main street. To Daniela, after weeks of travel and uncertainty, it looked like paradise. "It is not much," Sarah said apologetically. "It is perfect," Daniela said and meant it. Thank you so much." Ben set the trunk down at the foot of the bed. "I will leave you to settle in," he said. "But if you need anything, I work at the Everett Ranch about 5 miles west of town. Anyone can give you directions." "Thank you, Mr. Everett," Daniela said. "I do not know what I would have done if you had not helped me." "Ben," he corrected gently, "and you would have figured something out. You came all the way from Norway by yourself. That takes strength." He nodded to both women and left, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Sarah watched him go with an approving smile. "Ben Everett is one of the best men in this territory," she said. "His family owns one of the largest ranches around here. He could be arrogant about it, but he is not. He is always helping people who need it." Daniela moved to the window, watching as Ben emerged onto the street below and walked toward a hitching post where the big bay horse waited. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, acknowledging greetings from a few passers-by with a touch of his hat brim. "Get some rest," Sarah said. "We can talk about work tomorrow. Right now, you need to sleep." After Sarah left, Daniela did exactly that. She removed her traveling dress, washed her face and hands in the basin, and collapsed onto the bed in her chemise. Sleep claimed her almost instantly. She woke to darkness. and the sound of raised voices from the street below. For a moment, she did not know where she was, her heart pounding as she oriented herself. The room. Sarah's shop. Dodge City, not Norway, not home. Would anywhere ever feel like home again? The voices outside grew louder, and she heard a woman laughing, men shouting. She got up and peered carefully through the window. The street was lit by oil lamps now, and people moved between the saloons and hotels. It was a different town at night, rowdier and more dangerous. She turned away from the window and lit the small oil lamp on the bedside table. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed, and she knelt beside it, opening it carefully. Her hands found the wooden box her father had made, and she lifted it out, opening the carved lid. Inside were her mother's wedding ring, a silver brooch that had belonged to her grandmother, and a small portrait of her parents on their wedding day. She had been so certain that coming to America was the right choice, the only choice. Now, alone in this strange room in this strange town, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But no, there had been nothing left for her in Norway. At least here she had work and a place to sleep. That was more than many people had. She returned the box to the trunk and changed into a nightgown. Tomorrow, she would prove to Sarah that hiring her had been the right decision. She would work hard and learn quickly. She would make a place for herself here, whether the town wanted her or not. The next morning arrived too quickly, announced by the sounds of wagons and horses in the street below. Daniela dressed carefully in one of her simpler dresses and braided her hair neatly. When she descended the stairs, she found Sarah already at work at a large cutting table, fabric spread out before her. "Good morning," Sarah said cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you." Daniela approached the table. "What would you like me to do?" For the next several hours, Sarah taught her the basics of the work: how to measure customers, how to cut patterns, how to manage the more delicate fabrics. Daniela's mother had taught her to sew, but the fine work required for ladies' dresses was different from mending farm clothes. Still, she learned quickly, her fingers nimble with the needle. Several customers came in during the morning, and Daniela could not help but notice how they reacted to her presence. Some simply stared. Others whispered to Sarah, their eyes flicking to Daniela with suspicion or disdain. "Is that the foreign girl?" one woman asked Sarah in a carrying whisper. "That is Miss Henriksen," Sarah said firmly. "She is my new assistant, and she is doing excellent work." The woman sniffed. "I heard she comes from some savage country where they worship pagan gods." "Norway is a Christian country, madam," Daniela said quietly, not looking up from the hem she was stitching. "Just like America." "Well," the woman said, flustered, "I suppose, but you people are still different. You should try to fit in better if you want to be accepted here." After the woman left, Sarah touched Daniela's shoulder gently. "I am sorry about that. Beatrice Morton thinks she is better than everyone else because her husband owns the bank. Pay her no mind." "It is not just her," Daniela said. "Everyone looks at me like I do not belong here." "Then they are fools. You have as much right to be here as anyone." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Give them time. They will come around once they get to know you." Daniela wanted to believe that, but she was not so sure. At midday, Sarah insisted they take a break for lunch, and they walked to Abigail's restaurant. The place was busy with the dinner crowd, mostly men from the nearby ranches and businesses. Daniela felt the weight of their stares as she and Sarah found a table near the window. "Do not mind them," Sarah murmured. "They stare at every woman. It is the nature of a town with more men than women." But Daniela knew it was more than that. She could hear the whispers, see the way people leaned together to gossip. The foreign girl, the outsider, the one who did not belong. They had just received their food when the door opened and Ben walked in, followed by two other men. He was cleaner than he had been yesterday. his hair damp as though recently washed, wearing a fresh shirt. His eyes scanned the room and stopped when they found Daniela. He said something to his companions and walked over to their table. "Miss Henriksen," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Sarah, mind if I join you?" "Please do," Sarah said before Daniela could respond. She pulled out the chair beside her, forcing Ben to sit next to Daniela. He settled into the chair, and Daniela was suddenly very aware of how close he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space. He smelled faintly of soap and leather, clean and masculine. "How are you settling in?" he asked Daniela. "Sarah has been very kind," Daniela said. "I am learning the dress shop work." "She is a natural," Sarah added. "Quick learner and good with her hands." A man at the next table snorted loudly. "That is just what we need. Foreigners taking work from good American girls." Ben's expression darkened. He turned in his chair to face the man. "Do you have something to say, Porter?" The man, Porter, was thick-necked and red-faced, clearly spoiling for a fight. "I am saying that we have enough problems in this town without importing more foreigners. She should go back where she came from." "Miss Henriksen is Magnus's niece," Ben said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Magnus was a respected member of this community. She has every right to be here." "Magnus was a foreigner too," Porter said. "Just because he owned property did not make him a real American." Ben stood slowly, and Daniela saw the muscles in his jaw working. She reached out instinctively, touching his arm. "Please," she said quietly, "it is not worth it." He looked down at her, and something in his expression shifted. He took a breath and sat back down, but his eyes never left Porter. "You are right," he said to Daniela. "He is not worth it." Then, louder to Porter, "But you should know that Miss Henriksen is under my protection now. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me and my family. I trust that is clear." The restaurant had gone quiet. Porter's face turned even redder, but he did not respond. The implications of Ben's statement were clear. The Everett family was powerful in this region, and crossing them would be unwise. Abigail appeared with Ben's food, breaking the tension. "Here you go, Ben. On the house today." "You do not have to do that, Abby." "I know I do not have to. I want to." She glanced at Daniela with a warm smile. "And your meal is on the house too, dear. Welcome to Dodge City." It was the first truly warm welcome Daniela had received from anyone except Sarah and Ben, and it brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she managed to say. After that, the conversation at their table turned to lighter topics. Sarah talked about the latest fashion trends coming from the East, and Ben spoke about the ranch work, explaining how they were preparing for the fall cattle drive. Daniela mostly listened, content to hear the sound of friendly voices. "You should come out to the ranch sometime," Ben said to her as they were finishing their meal. "My mother would like to meet you. She knew your uncle fairly well." "I would like that," Daniela said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. As they left the restaurant, Ben walked with them back to the dress shop. People watched them, and Daniela could practically see the gossip spreading. The foreign girl walking with Ben Everett. What did it mean? Were they courting? The speculation was written clearly on every face they passed. At the shop door, Ben tipped his hat to both of them. "Ladies," he said, then to Daniela specifically, "remember what I said yesterday. You are home now and forever welcome." The words settled into Daniela's chest, warm and solid. She watched him walk away, back to where his horse was tethered, and felt something shift inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a life here. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Daniela worked long hours at the dress shop, learning quickly and proving her value to Sarah. The work was satisfying, creative in a way her farm chores in Norway had never been. She enjoyed the challenge of creating something beautiful from mere fabric and thread. The town's attitude toward her remained mixed. Some people continued to treat her with suspicion or outright hostility, but others began to warm to her, especially as they saw the quality of her work. A few customers specifically requested that she work on their garments, praising her fine stitching and attention to detail. Ben became a regular presence in her life. He stopped by the shop several times a week, sometimes with legitimate business. His mother or sisters needed new dresses, but often with transparent excuses. He would bring her books to read, thinking she might be bored in the evenings. He introduced her to more people around town, always with the same quiet authority that made it clear she had his protection and respect. Daniela found herself looking forward to his visits more than she should. There was something about Ben that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since leaving Norway. He was steady and reliable, but there was also a warmth to him, a kindness that showed in the way he treated everyone from the wealthiest rancher to the poorest shop clerk. One Saturday afternoon, about a month after her arrival, Ben rode up to the shop with a horse and buggy instead of his usual saddle horse. "I thought you might like to see the ranch," he said when she came out to greet him. "My mother has been pestering me about it for weeks. Says it is rude that I have not brought you out yet." Daniela glanced back at the shop, where Sarah was watching through the window with an encouraging smile. "I should not leave Sarah alone on a Saturday." "Sarah already gave her permission," Ben said. "I asked her this morning." Daniela laughed despite herself. "You planned this thoroughly." He grinned at her, and it transformed his usually serious face. "Come on. You have been working non-stop since you arrived. You deserve an afternoon off." She let him help her up into the buggy, acutely aware of his hand warm and strong around hers. As they drove through town and out onto the open prairie, Daniela felt something loosen in her chest. She had not realized how much she missed open spaces until now. The Everett Ranch was larger than she had imagined. The main house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, built to last, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Beyond it, she could see a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and miles of fenced pasture dotted with cattle. "This is beautiful," she said honestly. "My grandfather built the main house when he first came here in the 40s, Ben said with obvious pride. "My father expanded it, and we have been adding to the land ever since. It is a good place. Hard work, but good." A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 50s, with silver threading through her dark hair and the same striking blue-gray eyes as Ben. "You must be Daniela," she said warmly, coming down the porch steps. "I am Margaret Everett, Ben's mother. Welcome to our home." "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Everett. Call me Margaret, please. Mrs. Everett makes me feel ancient." She linked her arm through Daniela's, leading her toward the house. "Come inside. I have lemonade and fresh bread." "Ben, see to the horse." "Yes, madam," Ben said with amusement, and Daniela glanced back to see him shaking his head with a smile. Inside, the house was comfortable and lived in, with furniture that was practical rather than fancy but well made and cared for. Margaret led her to the kitchen, a large room with a massive stove and a table that could easily seat a dozen people. "Sit, sit," Margaret said, bustling around to pour lemonade and cut thick slices of bread still warm from the oven. "I want to hear all about you." "Ben has told me a little, but I want to hear it from you." Daniela found herself telling Margaret about her life in Norway, her parents' deaths, the decision to come to America. Margaret listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making sympathetic noises in all the right places. "It must have been terribly difficult," Margaret said when Daniela finished. "Losing your parents and then coming all this way only to find Magnus gone too. I am sorry you had to face that alone." Sarah and Ben helped me, Daniela said. I do not know what I would have done without their kindness. My son is a good man, Margaret said with undisguised pride. Takes after his father. Thomas, that was my husband, he passed 3 years ago. Heart just gave out one day while he was working. Ben has been running the ranch since then, and he has done a fine job of it. Ben came in then, having dealt with the horse, and accepted a glass of lemonade from his mother. Are you telling embarrassing stories about me? He asked. Not yet, Margaret said, but give me time. They spent a pleasant afternoon at the ranch. Margaret showed Daniela around the house and gardens, introducing her to Ben's two younger sisters, Emma and Caroline, who were 17 and 19 respectively. Both girls were friendly and curious, asking Daniela dozens of questions about Norway and what it was like to travel so far alone. Ben took her out to see the horses, and Daniela found herself enchanted by the animals. In Norway, they had kept only a single plow horse, but here there were dozens of beautiful creatures. You ride? Ben asked. A little. We had a horse on our farm, but I mostly drove the cart rather than riding. I will teach you properly if you like. Everyone should know how to ride out here. They walked through the pastures as the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting everything gold and orange. Ben pointed out different features of the land, talking about the work required to keep a ranch this size running. Daniela listened, fascinated by his knowledge and the obvious love he had for this place. It gets in your blood, he said. This land, the work. I have been to Kansas City a few times, Denver once. They are impressive places, I suppose, but I always want to come back here. This is home. You are lucky, Daniela said quietly, to have a place where you belong so completely. He stopped walking and turned to face her. You could belong here too, he said, if you wanted to. Her heart stuttered in her chest. They were standing very close, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue-gray eyes. Ben, I know it is too soon, he said quickly. I know you have only been here a month and you barely know me, but I want you to know that He paused, seeming to search for words. From the moment I saw you in that street, something just felt right, like I had been waiting for you without knowing it. I feel it too, Daniela admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It scares me. It scares me too. He smiled slightly, but not enough to make me walk away. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong. They stood there as the sun continued to set, hands joined, neither speaking, both afraid to break the moment. Margaret called them in for supper, and they returned to the house. The meal was lively and warm, with Emma and Caroline teasing Ben mercilessly, while Margaret tried to maintain some semblance of order. Daniela felt herself relaxing in a way she had not since leaving Norway. This was what a family felt like, and she had not realized how much she missed it. On the drive back to town, with darkness settling over the prairie and stars beginning to appear overhead, Ben was mostly quiet. But it was a comfortable silence, and when he helped her down from the buggy outside Sarah's shop, his hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for today, Daniela said. Your family is wonderful. They liked you, Ben said. Margaret told me to bring you back soon. I would like that. He smiled, tipped his hat, and climbed back into the buggy. Daniela watched him drive away, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was beating too fast. Sarah was waiting inside when Daniela entered through the shop door. So, she asked with barely contained excitement. So what? Daniela tried to sound casual but failed completely. Do not play coy with me. How was the ranch? How was Ben? Did something happen? Daniela felt her cheeks heat. He held my hand, she admitted. Sarah squealed with delight. I knew it. I knew Ben had feelings for you, the way he looks at you, Daniela, like you are the only person in the world." "It is too fast," Daniela protested, but she was smiling. "I have only known him for a month." "Sometimes that is all it takes," Sarah said. "I knew I loved my husband after 2 weeks. We would have married if he had not been killed in a mining accident." Her expression turned sad for a moment, then brightened again. "But I am happy for you. Ben is a good man, and you deserve happiness." That night, lying in bed, Daniela let herself think about what it might be like to truly build a life here, to have a home, a family, to belong somewhere again. She had come to America with so little hope, and now, impossibly, she found herself beginning to dream again. The following weeks brought changes both subtle and significant. Ben's open interest in Daniela shifted how some people in town treated her. Those who respected the Everett family became more welcoming, greeting her on the street and making small talk when they came into the shop. But it also hardened the attitudes of those who already disliked her. "Putting on airs now that Ben Everett is courting you," one woman said snidely when Daniela measured her for a new dress. "Thinking you are better than the rest of us." "I do not think that at all," Daniela said quietly, keeping her eyes on her work. "I am just trying to make a life here like anyone else." "You are not like anyone else. You are a foreigner and you always will be." Daniela bit her tongue and said nothing more. There was no point in arguing with people who had already made up their minds, but there were bright spots too. Margaret invited her to a ladies' tea at the ranch, where Daniela met several other women from the area. Some were standoffish, but others were kind, asking genuine questions about Norway and sharing their own stories of coming west. Ben continued to visit regularly, and their relationship deepened in small, steady ways. He brought her wildflowers he had picked out on the range. She mended a tear in his favorite shirt. They took walks in the evening when her work was done, talking about everything and nothing, gradually learning each other's stories. One evening in late September, as they walked along the creek that ran behind the town, Ben suddenly stopped and turned to face her. "Daniela, I need to tell you something." His serious tone made her nervous. "What is it?" "I am going on the cattle drive next week. We are taking a herd to Abilene. It will take about 3 weeks, maybe a month depending on weather and how the cattle move." Oh, she had known this was coming. He had mentioned the fall drive before, but the thought of him being gone for so long created a hollow feeling in her chest. "I will come back," he said, as though reading her thoughts. "I promise I will come back." "I know you will. Do I?" He stepped closer, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. "Because I need you to know that I will come back to you specifically, that you are the reason I will be counting the days until I can return." Her breath caught. "Ben, I love you, Daniela. I know it is fast, and maybe I should wait to tell you, but I am going to be gone for weeks, and I cannot leave without you knowing." Joy and fear swirled together in her chest. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not want to. It felt like too much, too soon, but I do." He kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise. It was Daniela's first real kiss, and it made her head spin and her heart soar. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "When I come back," Ben said, his forehead resting against hers, "I am going to ask you to marry me." "I wanted you to know that, to have time to think about your answer." "I do not need time to think," she said immediately. "My answer is yes." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure? Daniela, being a rancher's wife is hard work. The land can be brutal, the work never ends," and she stopped him with a finger on his lips. "I am not afraid of hard work. I grew up on a farm. I know what it means to work for what you have." She took a breath. "But you should know that people will talk. They already do not like that I am foreign. Some will say you should have chosen a proper American girl." "Then they can mind their own business," Ben said firmly. You are the one I want, the only one I want. If they have a problem with that, it is their problem, not ours." They walked back to town hand in hand, making plans for the future. Ben wanted to marry as soon as he returned from the drive, before winter set in. Margaret had already hinted that Daniela was welcome to move into the ranch house, at least until they could build a house of their own on the property. The night before Ben left for the cattle drive, he came to say goodbye. They stood on the street outside the dress shop, neither wanting to be the first to let go. "You will be careful?" Daniela asked, straightening his collar needlessly. "Always am." "Ben, I mean it. No taking unnecessary risks," he smiled. "I will be careful. I have something very important to come home to now." He kissed her once more, long and sweet, and then he was gone, riding off into the darkness toward the ranch. Daniela watched until she could no longer see him, then went inside and cried, though she could not have said if the tears were from sadness or happiness or some combination of both. The weeks that Ben was gone were the longest of Daniela's life. She threw herself into work, taking on extra projects to keep her hands and mind busy. Sarah watched her with sympathetic understanding, having been through this herself years ago. "Time moves differently when you are waiting for someone you love," Sarah said one afternoon as they worked together on a particularly complicated dress. "Every day feels like a week." "Does it get easier?" Daniela asked. "No, but you get better at hiding it." News came through town in bits and pieces. The drive was going well. They had reached Abilene safely. The sale had been successful. Ben was on his way back. Each piece of information was precious to Daniela, a small reassurance that he was alive and safe. In Ben's absence, Daniela faced more open hostility from some quarters. Without his protective presence, certain people felt emboldened to express their dislike more freely. One afternoon, a group of women came into the shop while Sarah was out on an errand. They browsed the fabrics and notions, whispering among themselves and shooting Daniela unfriendly glances. "Can I help you find anything?" Daniela asked politely. The leader of the group, a thin-lipped woman named Constance, turned to face her. "You can help by going back to wherever you came from. Ben Everett is too good for the likes of you." "Ben is a grown man who can make his own choices," Daniela said, keeping her voice steady. "He is making a mistake and everyone knows it. You have bewitched him somehow, used your foreign ways to trap him, but we see through you." "I have done nothing wrong," Daniela said firmly, "and I am not going anywhere. We will see about that." Constance stepped closer, her face twisted with malice. "Accidents happen. People have been known to leave town suddenly when they realize they are not wanted. You should think about that." Fear spiked through Daniela, but she refused to let it show. "Are you threatening me? I am just offering friendly advice." Constance's smile was cold. "For your own good, of course." They left without buying anything, and Daniela sank into a chair, her legs shaking. She wanted to dismiss the encounter as empty words, but the threat had felt real. She was suddenly very aware of how vulnerable she was here. A foreigner with no family, no resources beyond what Sarah paid her. When Sarah returned and Daniela told her what had happened, Sarah's face darkened with anger. "That woman is poison," she said. "She has been after Ben for years, trying to match him with her daughter. This is just jealousy talking. But what if she tries something? She would not dare. The Everetts have too much influence in this region." But Sarah looked worried despite her reassuring words. That night, Daniela lay awake listening to every sound from the street below, jumping at shadows. She had never felt unsafe before, even in her first difficult days in town, but something about Constance's words had rattled her. Ben returned on a crisp October morning when the leaves were just beginning to turn. Daniela heard the commotion in the street and rushed to the window to see a group of riders coming into town, dusty and trail-worn. Ben was at the front, and even from a distance, she could see him scanning the buildings, looking for something. Looking for her. She flew down the stairs and out the door, not caring what anyone thought. Ben saw her and dismounted in one fluid motion, and then she was in his arms and he was lifting her off her feet, spinning her around right there in the middle of Main Street. "I missed you," he said into her hair. "God, I missed you. I missed you too, so much." He set her down but did not let go, his arms wrapped tight around her. She could feel his heart beating fast, matching her own. "Come to the ranch tomorrow," he said. "We have plans to make." She nodded against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, dust and horses and leather and home. That night, Daniela told Sarah everything Constance had said. She had held off mentioning it before, not wanting to worry Sarah when nothing could be done about it, but now that Ben was back, she felt she needed to tell someone. "You need to tell Ben," Sarah said immediately. "He should know that woman threatened you. I do not want to cause trouble." "Daniela, this is not about causing trouble, this is about your safety." Sarah gripped her shoulders. "Promise me you will tell him." Daniela promised, though she dreaded the conversation. The next morning, she borrowed Sarah's spare riding horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, and rode out to the Everett ranch. Ben was waiting for her, and the smile that lit his face when he saw her made her heart flutter. They walked out to the creek that ran through the ranch property, and Ben produced a small box from his pocket. "I wanted to do this right," he said. "Daniela Henriksen, will you marry me?" Inside the box was a simple gold ring with a small blue stone. "It was my grandmother's," Ben explained. "The stone is a sapphire. My grandfather gave it to her when they married." "It is beautiful," Daniela breathed. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed under the cottonwood trees, the autumn sun warm on their faces, and Daniela felt happiness so complete it was almost painful. But then she remembered what she needed to tell him, and the happiness dimmed slightly. "Ben, something happened while you were gone." His expression shifted immediately to concern. "What, are you all right?" She told him about Constance and the other women, about the threat. With each word, Ben's face grew darker until he looked genuinely angry. "She threatened you," he said flatly. "She came into the shop and threatened you." She said it was advice, but yes, that is what it felt like. Ben stood up, pacing along the creek bank. "That woman has always been trouble. She has been trying to push her daughter at me for years, ever since her daughter came of age. I have never shown any interest, but she would not take the hint. I do not want to cause problems between you and other families in the area. You are not causing anything. This is entirely on Constance and her poisonous attitude." He came back to her, kneeling down so they were eye level. "Daniela, I need you to understand something. You are going to be my wife. That makes you family, and I protect my family. Always." "I know, but no buts. Tomorrow we are going to town and we are going to make our engagement official. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours, and anyone who has a problem with it can answer to me." True to his word, Ben rode into town with her the next day. He made a point of stopping at the general store, the bank, the saloon, telling everyone about their engagement. Word spread fast, and by that evening, everyone in Dodge City knew that Ben Everett was marrying the Norwegian woman. The reactions were mixed. Some people congratulated them warmly. Others were coldly polite. And a few, like Constance and her circle, were openly hostile. "You are making a mistake," Constance said when she encountered them on the street. "That foreign girl will be your ruin." "Mrs. Pemberton," Ben said coldly, "if I hear that you have spoken to or about my fiancé with anything but respect, I will make sure that your husband's business dealings in this town become very difficult. Do I make myself clear?" Constance's face went red, then white. Her husband owned a freight company that depended heavily on contracts with ranchers like the Everetts. The threat was clear and effective. "You would not dare," she sputtered. "Try me." Ben's voice was hard as iron. "Daniela is going to be my wife, and she will be treated with the respect she deserves. Anyone who cannot manage that will find themselves on the wrong side of my family's influence." He took Daniela's arm and walked past, leaving Constance speechless in the street. "You did not have to do that," Daniela said quietly once they were out of earshot. "Yes, I did. She needs to understand that her behavior will not be tolerated." He glanced down at her. "I meant what I said. You are under the protection of the Everett name now. That means something around here." They planned the wedding for early November, before the winter weather set in fully. Margaret took over most of the planning with the enthusiasm of a woman who had been waiting years for her son to marry. Emma and Caroline were delighted to help, treating Daniela like the sister they had always wanted. Sarah insisted on making Daniela's wedding dress, refusing to accept any payment. "You are my friend," she said simply. "Let me do this for you." The dress was beautiful, made of cream-colored silk that Sarah special ordered from Kansas City, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. When Daniela tried it on for the final fitting, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. "You look like a princess," Caroline breathed. "You look like a bride," Emma corrected. "A beautiful bride." The week before the wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived at the dress shop. Daniela looked up from her work to see an older woman standing in the doorway, a woman she had never seen before but who looked somehow familiar. "Are you Daniela Henriksen?" the woman asked in Norwegian. Daniela gasped. She had not heard her native language spoken since leaving Norway. "Yes," she responded in the same language. "Who are you?" "My name is Ingrid Olsen. I was friends with your Uncle Magnus. I just heard you were in town, and I wanted to meet you." They talked for over an hour, sometimes in Norwegian and sometimes in English. Ingrid had come from Norway 10 years ago with her husband, who had passed away 5 years back. She lived on a small farm north of Dodge City and came to town only occasionally for supplies. "Magnus talked about you often," Ingrid said. "He was so looking forward to your arrival. I am sorry you never got to see him." "I am sorry too. But he would be happy to know you are here, that you have found love and a place to call home." Ingrid smiled. "That is all he wanted for you." Before she left, Ingrid pressed a small package into Daniela's hands. "These were some things your uncle had set aside for you." "Small things, but I thought you should have them." Inside the package, Daniela found a few letters Magnus had written but never sent, a photograph of him and her father as young men, and a small wooden carving of a horse that her father had made. She clutched the items to her chest and wept, mourning the uncle she had never gotten to know, but grateful for this small connection to her past. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and unseasonably warm weather. The ceremony was held at the small church in town, with most of the community invited despite the mixed feelings many had about the match. Daniela wore Sarah's dress and carried wildflowers that Emma and Caroline had gathered from the ranch. She had no family to walk her down the aisle, but Sarah offered to accompany her, and Daniela accepted gratefully. Ben waited at the altar looking handsome in a new suit Margaret had insisted on buying. When Daniela appeared in the doorway, his face lit up with such pure joy that she felt tears prick her eyes. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They exchanged vows and rings, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ben kissed her so tenderly that someone in the back of the church sighed audibly. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and enough food to feed half the county. People danced and ate and toasted the newlyweds. Even some of those who had been skeptical about the marriage seemed to soften as they saw how happy Ben and Daniela were together. Constance Pemberton did not attend, but her absence was a relief rather than an insult. As evening fell and the party continued around them, Ben pulled Daniela aside, leading her away from the crowd to a quiet spot behind the barn. "Hello, Mrs. Everett," he said, pulling her close. "Hello, husband," she responded, loving how the word felt on her tongue. "Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever thought I could be again." He kissed her, deep and passionate, and Daniela felt herself melt into him. This man, this place, this life they were building together felt more real and solid than anything she had known before. They spent their wedding night in the ranch house, in the room that had belonged to Ben's parents and was now theirs. It was strange and wonderful and overwhelming all at once, but they had each other, and that made everything right. The next morning, Margaret tactfully announced that she would be staying with Emma and Caroline in the second house on the property, giving Ben and Daniela privacy to start their married life. The main house was theirs now. Daniela continued to work at the dress shop, though she cut her hours back to help more at the ranch. She discovered she enjoyed ranch work, the physical labor satisfying in a way that reminded her of her childhood farm in Norway. Ben taught her to ride properly, and soon she could handle even the more spirited horses. She learned to rope cattle to recognize signs of illness in the herd, to read the weather and the land. The work was hard, but she had never shied away from hard work. Winter came, bringing snow and bitter cold. But the ranch house was warm and solid, and Daniela felt safer than she had in years. She and Ben settled into married life with surprising ease, each learning the rhythms and habits of the other. They talked about everything during those long winter evenings. Ben told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's death, and the responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders. Daniela told him more about Norway, about her parents and the life she had left behind. "Do you ever regret coming here?" Ben asked one night as they lay in bed, snow falling softly outside their window. "No," she said without hesitation. "I miss my parents every day. I miss the familiarity of home. But I do not regret coming here. If I had stayed, I never would have met you." "I am glad you came," he said, pulling her closer. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." By early spring, Daniela suspected she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Ben, wanting to be certain before getting his hopes up. When the doctor in town confirmed it, she rode back to the ranch with her heart singing. She found Ben in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal soon. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a smile. "How was town?" he asked. "Good, I have news." Something in her tone made him put down the brush he was holding and give her his full attention. "What kind of news?" "The best kind." She took his hands in hers. "Ben, I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then joy broke across his face like sunrise, and he swept her up into his arms, spinning her around just like he had that first day he came back from the cattle drive. "We are having a baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. "Daniela, we are having a baby." He insisted she stop working immediately, both at the shop and on the ranch, though she protested that pregnancy was not an illness. They compromised. She would do lighter tasks and rest when she felt tired. Margaret was overjoyed at the news of a grandchild and immediately began knitting tiny garments. Emma and Caroline argued over who would be the better aunt. The whole family was caught up in excited anticipation. The town's reaction was more measured. Some people congratulated her warmly, genuinely happy for the young couple. Others were merely polite, and a few, predictably, found ways to be cruel. "That baby will be half foreign," Daniela overheard someone say at the Mercantile. "Never truly American." The word stung, but Ben was there immediately, his hand finding hers. "Our child will be exactly who they are meant to be," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And loved beyond measure. That is all that matters." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Daniela felt well most of the time, tired easily but otherwise healthy. As her belly grew, she found herself thinking often about her mother, wishing she could be there to offer advice and reassurance. One afternoon, Ingrid came to visit, bringing preserves and bread and Norwegian stories. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she said as they sat on the porch watching the cattle graze in the distance. "Making a new life here, finding love, starting a family, that takes courage." "Sometimes I do not feel very courageous," Daniela admitted. "Sometimes I still feel like that frightened girl who stepped off the stagecoach not knowing where to go." "But you are not her anymore," Ingrid said gently. "You have grown and changed. You have become who you were meant to be." The baby came in late October, just as the leaves were turning gold. Labor was long and difficult, but when Daniela finally heard that first cry, every moment of pain was forgotten. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, wailing bundle in her arms. Ben was there, having refused to be sent away despite the doctor's protests that the birthing room was no place for men. He looked at his son with such awe and tenderness that Daniela fell in love with him all over again. "He is perfect," Ben whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas Magnus Everett after both his grandfathers. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's light eyes, and from the start he had a strong set of lungs. Margaret was besotted with her first grandchild, as were Emma and Caroline. The baby was passed from aunt to grandmother and back again, all of them marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. Even some of those in town who had been coldest to Daniela seemed to soften when they saw her with the baby. There was something about a mother and child that transcended prejudice, at least for most people, but not for everyone. Constance made a pointed remark about foreign blood when she encountered Daniela and the baby in town one day. Ben heard about it and paid a visit to Mr. Pemberton's business office. What was said there, Daniela did not know, but Constance never spoke another unkind word to or about her again. Little Thomas grew quickly, a healthy, happy baby who filled the ranch house with noise and life. Daniela discovered that motherhood came naturally to her, perhaps because of the animals she had helped care for on the farm in Norway. Ben was a devoted father, often coming in from the range dusty and tired only to spend an hour playing with his son before dinner. Watching them together, Daniela felt her heart so full she thought it might burst. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. He smiled early, laughed often, and by the time he was 10 months old, was pulling himself up to stand on wobbly legs. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Thomas played with wooden blocks Ben had carved, Daniela leaned against her husband's shoulder. "You remember when we first met?" she asked. "Of course. You were in the street trying to gather your belongings, and that horse nearly trampled you. I was so lost that day, so alone and frightened. I thought I had made the worst mistake of my life coming here. And now—" She looked at their son, at the land stretching out before them, at the man beside her. "Now I know I was meant to be here. This is my home. You are my home." Ben kissed her temple. "You are home now and forever welcome," he said, echoing the words he had spoken to her that first day. Always and forever. As the years passed, their family grew. 2 years after Thomas came Elizabeth, a daughter with her mother's blonde hair and her father's smile. Then, 3 years later, twin boys they named William and James, who were trouble from the moment they learned to crawl. The ranch prospered under Ben's management. They expanded the herd, added more land, built a school on the property so the children would not have to travel far for education. Daniela became known throughout the region for her beautiful needlework, and many women came to her for special garments. She never forgot those first difficult days in Dodge City, the mockery and the hostility. But over time, as she became more established, as her family became an integral part of the community, those voices faded. She was no longer the foreign woman. She was Mrs. Everett, the rancher's wife, the mother of those 4 energetic children. Sarah remained a close friend, eventually remarrying a kind farmer and having 2 children of her own. Margaret lived to see all her grandchildren grow, passing peacefully in her sleep when Thomas was 15. Ingrid became like a grandmother to Daniela's children, teaching them Norwegian words and songs, keeping that connection to their mother's heritage alive. When she died, Thomas was 12, Elizabeth was 10, and the twins were 7. Daniela wept at her funeral, mourning not just Ingrid but all the connections to her old life that were slowly fading. But she had new connections now, deeper roots than she had ever had in Norway. She had built a life here through hard work and love, and she had never been happier. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ben took her back to the creek where he had proposed. The cottonwood trees had grown taller, their leaves whispering in the autumn breeze. 20 years, he said, taking her hands in his. And I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. I love you too, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They walked back to the house hand in hand, just as they had on their wedding day. The children were there. Thomas, now 22 and helping run the ranch, Elizabeth 18, and engaged to a young man from a neighboring ranch, and the twins 15, and causing all the usual trouble that teenage boys could manage. That night, with all the family gathered around the dinner table, Daniela looked at each face and felt such gratitude it brought tears to her eyes. She had lost so much when she came to America: her parents, her home, her uncle, the land she had known since birth. But she had gained so much more. A husband who loved her beyond reason. Children who were strong and healthy and kind. A home that was truly hers. A place where she belonged, not despite who she was but because of it. Later, after the children had gone to bed and she and Ben sat on the porch watching the stars, she thought about that frightened girl who had stepped off the stagecoach 21 years ago. That girl had been so certain she did not belong, that she would never find a place in this harsh new land. But she had been wrong. She had found more than just a place. She had found everything she had been searching for without knowing it: love, family, purpose, and home. "What are you thinking about?" Ben asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. "Everything," she said. "How lucky I am, how grateful." "I am the lucky one," he said, kissing her hair. "You changed my life, Daniela, made it better in every way." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. In the distance, a coyote howled, and somewhere in the house, one of the twins laughed at something. This was home. This was family. This was love. And Daniela Henriksen Everett, who had once been mocked for being foreign, who had been told she did not belong, knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The cowboy had been right all those years ago. She was home now, and forever welcome. As more years passed and their children grew into adults, Daniela often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Thomas took over more of the ranch responsibilities, showing the same skill and dedication his father had. Elizabeth married her young man and moved to a ranch 20 miles south, but visited often with her growing family. The twins, William and James, were different as night and day despite being identical in appearance. William wanted to study law and eventually moved to Kansas City to pursue his education. James stayed on the ranch, declaring he could never be happy anywhere else. When Daniela turned 50, Ben threw her a surprise party that half the county attended. She stood in the middle of the crowd, overwhelmed by how many people had come, how many lives she had touched in her years here. "Remember when you first came to town?" Sarah asked, standing beside her. And people whispered about the foreign woman. "I remember," Daniela said. "Look at you now. You are one of the most respected women in the territory." It was true. Daniela had worked hard to earn that respect, not by changing who she was, but by staying true to herself while also embracing her new home. She spoke English fluently now, though her accent would never completely disappear. She had learned American ways while also keeping her Norwegian heritage alive, teaching her children the language and traditions of her homeland. Ben found her later in the evening, pulling her away from the crowd to dance under the stars just as they had at their wedding. "Happy birthday, my love," he said. "Thank you for this, for everything. You have given me a beautiful life, Daniela, beautiful children, a happy home. I wake up grateful every single day." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and felt the truth of his words echo in her own heart. When they were both 65, they handed over the main ranch operations to Thomas and James, moving to a smaller house they had built on the eastern edge of the property. It had a large porch perfect for watching sunrises, and a garden where Daniela could grow vegetables and flowers. Elizabeth had 5 children by then and came to visit every Sunday. William had become a successful lawyer and married a woman from Boston, though they visited whenever they could. Thomas and James both married, and soon there were grandchildren running all over the ranch. Daniela loved being a grandmother, spoiling the little ones in ways she had never indulged her own children. Ben built them a tree house and taught them to ride just as he had taught their parents. The ranch was always full of laughter and life. One evening, sitting on their porch and watching the sun set over land that had become as familiar to her as breathing, Daniela said, "I want to write everything down, our story, for the grandchildren." "That is a good idea," Ben said. "They should know where they came from, all of it." So she began to write, page after page of memories. The stagecoach arriving in Dodge City, the hostility she had faced, the day Ben had pulled her from danger and changed her life forever. She wrote about their courtship, their marriage, the children and grandchildren, and all the joy and heartbreak that came with building a life. When she finished, months later, she gave copies to each of their children. Thomas read it and wept. Elizabeth called it the most beautiful love story she had ever heard. William showed it to his wife, who was fascinated by the history. James kept his copy by his bedside and reread it often. When Daniela was 70, she woke one morning to find Ben still in bed beside her, his hand cool in hers. He had passed peacefully in his sleep, just as his father had, his heart simply giving out after a life well lived. The grief was overwhelming. They had been together for almost 50 years, and she did not know how to exist without him. The funeral was the largest Dodge City had ever seen, with people traveling from all over Kansas to pay their respects. "He was a good man," person after person told her. "He was the best man," she would reply. Her children wanted her to move in with one of them, but Daniela insisted on staying in her small house. This was where she and Ben had spent their final years together, and she could feel his presence here still. She spent her remaining years surrounded by family, gardening and sewing and telling stories to anyone who would listen. She taught the youngest grandchildren Norwegian words, just as Ingrid had taught her children. She shared recipes and techniques she had learned from her mother and grandmother. On her 80th birthday, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were dozens of them now, children, grandchildren, even a few great-grandchildren. Daniela stood among them and marveled at what she and Ben had created. "Speech," Thomas called out. "Grandma should make a speech." Daniela laughed but stood, looking out at all those beloved faces. "When I came to this place as a young woman," she began, "I was lost and alone. People mocked me for being foreign, for being different, but one man saw past all of that. He said to me, 'You are home now and forever welcome,' and he meant it." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Ben gave me a home, yes, but more than that, he gave me the courage to make this place my own, to stop apologizing for who I was and start celebrating it. And because of that gift, I was able to give all of you roots in two worlds, the old world of Norway and the new world of America. You taught us to be proud of where we come from while also embracing where we are," Elizabeth said, her voice thick with emotion. "That is the most important lesson I can leave you," Daniela said. "Never forget where you came from, but do not let it stop you from planting roots where you are. Home is not just a place. It is the people you love and who love you in return." She passed away peacefully 2 years later, on a warm spring morning with the windows open and the smell of blooming flowers drifting through the house. Her children were with her, and her last words were in Norwegian. "Jeg kommer, min kjære, I am coming, my darling." They buried her beside Ben on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under the wide Kansas sky. The headstone read, "Daniela Henriksen Everett, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. Home at last." Thomas ran the ranch for many more years, passing it eventually to his own son. Elizabeth's descendants spread throughout Kansas and beyond. William's children became lawyers and teachers and doctors. James's children stayed on the land, ranchers through and through. And all of them, every single descendant, knew the story of their grandmother who had come from Norway with nothing but courage and hope, who had faced mockery and hatred but persevered, who had been told she did not belong but proved them all wrong by building a legacy that would last for generations. They knew about the cowboy who had seen her not as foreign but as home, who had loved her completely and given her the strength to love herself. They knew about the ranch that had become a sanctuary, the town that had eventually accepted her, the life that had been built one day at a time through hard work and faith. The story was passed down through the years, becoming family legend, each generation adding their own chapters. But it always began the same way, with a young woman stepping off a stagecoach into a dusty street, facing an uncertain future, unaware that she was about to meet the man who would change everything. And it always ended the same way, with that woman surrounded by love, having built a life richer than she ever imagined possible, having proven that home is not where you are from but where you are loved, where you belong, where you plant your roots and watch them grow deep and strong. In the end, Daniela Henriksen had not just found a home in Dodge City, Kansas. She had become home for countless others, her husband, her children, her grandchildren, and all those who came after. Her legacy was not just the ranch or the family name, but the lesson she taught by living, that courage and love can overcome any obstacle, that different does not mean less, and that everyone deserves a place to belong. The cowboy had been right. She was home and forever welcome. And through her strength and grace, she had made sure that all who came after her would be welcome too, building a family and a legacy rooted in acceptance, love, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves a place to call home.